There is a moment just before sleep when your reflection becomes something else. Not you, not quite. A flicker behind the eyes, a hesitation in recognition, as if the mirror sees you more clearly than you ever could. This is not metaphor. In the Capgras delusion, a real psychological condition, people come to believe that those closest to them, family, lovers, even themselves, are imposters. Not delusional in the sense of madness, but systematically, disturbingly convinced. Their reasoning remains intact. Their emotions betray them. They look at their mother and feel nothing. Therefore, she is not their mother. Logic unspools from feeling. You blink at your own image in the dark glass of your screen. Do you recognize yourself? Can you be sure? Consider this. The brain does not see itself. It has no sensory organs within its own folds. It constructs a self based on input, on memory, on continuity. But what if that continuity is an illusion? What if every second you die and are replaced by someone almost identical? Someone who believes they are you because they have access to your memories, your habits, your language, but not your essence because there is none? You might be the 10th version of yourself today, or the 1,000th. There's no way to tell. And worse, perhaps there never was a first. Think about the ship of Theseus. If every plank is replaced over time, is it still the same ship? Now imagine the ship is you. Every cell replaced, every thought overwritten, every belief reshaped. At what point do you stop being you? And if there's no identifiable moment, was there ever you to begin with? The question isn't whether you're real. It's whether anything is. Now, consider that your brain doesn't actually process the present. Visual processing alone takes around 100 milliseconds. By the time you see something, it's already in the past. Your entire experience of reality is a reconstruction, a best guess made by your brain after the fact. So when you think you're experiencing the world, you're only ever experiencing the memory of it. What if the delay is longer than you think? What if the world has already ended and you're just now realizing it? What if your memories were inserted last night, fully formed, complete with childhood recollections and future plans? How would you know? You wouldn't, because the test of authenticity is always internal. Memory feels true because it must, even when it lies. You trust your mind because you have no alternative. But trust is not truth. It's just the absence of doubt. And doubt is the first crack. It begins with a single idea, that you're not who you think you are. That idea spreads like ink and water. It stains everything. Language, identity, history, all of it. Who decided what is real? You did, or someone like you. But what if they were wrong? What if you were wrong? Even now, as you read these words, your brain is rewriting itself. Synapses firing, connections shifting, meaning collapsing into new shapes. The person who started reading this sentence is not the one finishing it. So who are you? And if you can't answer that, if you hesitate even slightly, then how can you be sure you exist at all? You believe in knowledge. You trust that some things are true, others false. But what if truth is not a destination, but a mirage that recedes the closer you approach? What if every answer only deepens the question? There's a real place, not physical, but mathematical, called the Library of Babel, imagined by Jorge Luis Borges, but grounded in real combinatorial theory. It is an infinite library containing every possible book of a certain length, written using a fixed alphabet. Every permutation, every combination. This means it contains all knowledge, every scientific discovery, every poem ever written or unwritten, every biography of every person who has lived or could live. But here's the horror. It also contains every falsehood, every lie, every distortion, and they look exactly the same. You cannot tell them apart. Now imagine that your mind is this library. Every thought, every belief, every certainty, it is not curated. It is randomly generated from the symbols available to you, language, culture, experience. You do not choose what is true. You merely stumble upon it, or think you do. But how do you know when you found it? There is no index, no guide, no librarian. You're lost in a labyrinth of your own making, and worse, you don't even know the walls are there. Consider Gödel's incompleteness theorems. They are not abstract musings. They are formal, provable truths about formal systems. Any system capable of expressing basic arithmetic will contain statements that are true but unprovable within that system. Worse still, the system cannot prove its own consistency. So any framework you use to understand reality, be it science, philosophy, or your own reasoning, is either incomplete or inconsistent. It must be missing something, or it contradicts itself. You can never fully trust your own logic. And if you try to build a system that does, it collapses under its own weight. This is not metaphor. It is mathematics. Cold, absolute, indifferent. Now apply this to your sense of self. You believe you have a consistent identity, a coherent mind. But what if you were like one of those incomplete systems, holding contradictory beliefs, acting on invisible axioms, unable to resolve paradoxes because they are built into your structure? What if your thoughts are not yours, but echoes bouncing through an empty hall? Think of the Sorite's paradox. How many grains of sand make a heap? Remove one grain at a time. When does it stop being a heap? There is no precise point. And yet, we insist on boundaries, on definitions, on truth. But meaning dissolves under scrutiny. You say, I am me with certainty. But what is the I? Is it memory? Emotion? Thought? If you replace each part of yourself, your body, your beliefs, your desires, until nothing remains of what you once were, what is left? Is identity just a grammatical convenience? A word we invented so we wouldn't scream into the void? Now, consider the ship of Theseus again, but inverted. Suppose someone collects every piece of the original ship, reassembles it perfectly, and sets it afloat once more. Now there are two ships, the repaired one and the reconstructed one. Which is the real one? There is no answer, just as there is no real you. Only versions, copies, fragments, and none of them add up. You cling to continuity, but continuity is an illusion. Each moment is disconnected from a last. Your brain stitches them together, invents a narrative thread where none exists. Like film frames flickering too fast for you to notice the gaps. But what if you begin to see the gaps? What if the illusion phrase? Would you still call yourself real? Would you still call yourself whole? Or would you realize, too late, that you were always just a story told in the dark? You think time flows. You feel it in your bones, in the ticking of clocks, in the aging of your body. But what if time is not a river, but a frozen landscape, and you're only now realizing that you are already at the end? Consider this. The block universe theory, supported by Einstein's equations and widely accepted among physicists, suggests that past, present, and future all exist simultaneously. There is no now. There is no motion through time. All moments are equally real, eternally fixed, like pages in a book that has already been written. Your birth, your death, the heat death of the universe, they are all there, always. You are not moving toward your death. You have always been dead. You just haven't reached that page yet. And worse, there is no reaching, because movement through time is an illusion created by your consciousness. A flicker across static coordinates, like watching a film frame by frame, believing the character is running when in fact they are already everywhere on the reel. What does that make you? A momentary flicker in a structure that has no beginning or end. A pattern repeating itself endlessly, unaware that it never truly changes. Think of the Boltzmann brain hypothesis. In an infinite universe, statistical fluctuations can produce self-aware entities with false memories, full belief systems, entire lives, all without ever having lived them. You could be one such fluctuation, a temporary coherence in chaos, a brain floating in entropy, dreaming of bodies, of history, of meaning. There would be no way to tell, because the dream would contain its own evidence. False recollections of childhood, of learning about entropy, even of reading this sentence right now. It would feel real because reality is nothing more than what your brain reports as real. So how do you know this isn't the first moment you've ever existed? How do you know this isn't also the last? Time doesn't pass. It collapses inward, each second folding into the next like a recursive loop. You wake up each morning thinking you are continuing something, but perhaps you are being reset, rewritten, reassembled from the same raw material, with the same false continuity. Like a program restarting itself endlessly, convinced it is making progress. Now consider the heat death of the universe. It is inevitable, absolute entropy, a state where no energy can be transferred, no work can be done, no thoughts can be formed. Time ceases to have meaning. No change, no difference between before and after. Eternal stillness. But here's the horror. From the perspective of that final state, everything that ever happened, including your life, already did. Your suffering, your joy, your confusion, your certainty, it all exists as a completed arc in a universe that is already dead. You're not delaying the end. You're trapped inside it. And if the block universe is true, then so is this. Every possible version of you already exists. The one who chose differently. The one who never woke up. The one who screamed and vanished. They are all real. You are not one of them. You are all of them, and none of them. Because identity fractures under time, under eternity. You believe you are a single thread weaving through experience. But what if you are only a collection of overlapping illusions, stitched together by a brain trying to delay the collapse for just one more second? What if this is the moment you begin to unravel? You have looked into mirrors all your life. You trust them to reflect what is there, your face, your body, the world behind you. But what if the mirror does not merely show? What if it observes? Consider this. When you look at a mirror, you do not see yourself. You see a representation of yourself constructed by your brain from reflected light. That image is not you. It is an interpretation. And interpretations can be manipulated. In A Stranger in the Mirror phenomenon, a documented psychological effect, some individuals report seeing unfamiliar faces when looking at their own reflections. Not illusions or hallucinations, but full, coherent experiences of seeing someone else staring back. These are not mentally ill people. They are ordinary individuals who suddenly find themselves strangers to themselves. You might not recognize your own reflection tomorrow. Or worse, you might recognize it too well and realize it has been watching you for some time. Now think of the mirror test, used to measure self-awareness in animals. A mark is placed on the subject's body, and they are shown a mirror. If they touch the mark while looking at their reflection, they pass. They recognize themselves. Humans typically pass around age 2. But what if that recognition is not a milestone, but a trap? Because once you become aware of your reflection, you begin to shape yourself around it. You adjust posture, expression, appearance. Your sense of self becomes tied to what you see. And if that reflection were to change, if it were to move differently, speak differently, blink slower, what would that say about you? What if your reflection knows something you don't? That it is the real one? Think of the quantum mirroring effect in physics, where particles appear to anticipate measurement, as if the act of observation itself influences reality. Observation collapses possibility into actuality. So what happens when a mirror watches you? Does it alter you? Does it fix you in a place? If so, then every time you look into a mirror, you're being defined, narrowed, reduced. And if the mirror stops reflecting you, what then? Would you still exist? There's a condition called mirrored self-misidentification, where people believe their reflection is another person. They talk to it, argue with it, fear it. Some insist it is following them, that it has its own will. But what if they are right? What if the reflection isn't a copy of you, but a version that broke free? Imagine waking up one morning and realizing your reflection no longer mimics you. It moves slightly out of sync. It blinks when you don't, smiles when you frown. At first, you think it's a trick of the eye, but then it begins to gesture independently. Then mouth words you never say. Would you still call yourself the original? Or would you begin to suspect that you are the echo? That you have always been the echo? Because consider this. How do you know that you are the one in front of the mirror and not the one inside it? Your memories tell you. But memory is not proof. Memory is malleable, suggestible, easily rewritten. What if your entire life was implanted after the switch? What if you were born inside the glass, and the world outside is the illusion? You cannot test it, because any test you perform, your reflection performs too. Any experiment you design, it follows flawlessly. Even if you close your eyes, it remains. Watching, waiting, and now, as you read these words, ask yourself, is the one reading them truly you? Or is it only pretending? You believe you use language to express your thoughts. But what if it is the other way around? What if language is not your tool, but your master? What if every word you speak shapes not only how you think, but what you can think? Consider this. The Sapir-Whorf hypothesis, also known as linguistic relativity, suggests that the structure of a language influences its speaker's worldview and cognition. In other words, you do not simply describe reality. You are trapped within the grammar of your tongue. Your perception of time, color, causality, even selfhood is dictated by the linguistic scaffolding in which your mind was built. If your language has no word for a concept, can you truly conceive of it? And if it does, did you ever invent it? Or did it invent you? Think of the word I. It appears simple, a pronoun, a subject. But what is the I that speaks? Is it consistent? Can you point to it? Pin it down? Or is it always shifting, depending on mood, context, memory? You say, I am angry. But who is the speaker who observes the anger? And who observes that observer? Language creates layers, each one further from the core. If there is one, now consider the liar paradox. This sentence is false. If it's true, then it must be false. If it's false, then it must be true. This is not just a clever trick. It is a crack in the foundation of logic itself. Language, when turned upon itself, collapses into contradiction. And yet, you live inside language. You think with it. You feel with it. You love, hate, suffer, and die within its recursive loops. What if your suffering is not real, but only sayable? And what if that is enough? Because here is the deeper horror. You cannot escape language. Even silence is a form of speech. Even thought is internalized dialogue. There is no raw, unfiltered experience, only interpretation dressed in words. Words that were not yours to begin with. They were given to you by parents, culture, history, systems of power. Every phrase you speak was once spoken to you. Every idea you claim as your own was shaped by centuries of discourse you never chose to enter. So where is the boundary between your mind and the voices that taught you how to think? Can you find it? Or have you always been speaking someone else's script? Now imagine a language so complete, so absolute, that it contains all possible truths and all possible lies. A language where every statement is both provable and disprovable, where meaning folds endlessly inward, like a snake eating its own tail. That language already exists. It is yours, because every sentence you have ever believed was both a revelation and a deception. Every truth you hold dear is only a convention of thought, a habit of syntax, and habits can be broken. But what remains when they are? There is a phenomenon called aphasia, where damage to the brain causes a person to lose the ability to understand or produce language. Some patients report an eerie sense of clarity afterward, as if, without words, the world becomes simpler, more direct. No labels, no negatives, just pure, immediate sensation. Some call it peace, others call it terror, because without language, there is no self, no story, no meaning, only presence. But presence without definition, a void filled not with understanding, but with silence. And now, as you read these words, ask yourself, are you thinking them, or are they thinking you? You believe you are awake, but what if you have never truly woken up? Consider this. Every night, You fall into a world that feels real until you leave it. In dreams, your senses function: sight, sound, touch. Your emotions respond. You run from danger, laugh at jokes, weep at loss. When you wake, you dismiss these experiences as illusions. But how do you know waking life is not just another dream, one that has not yet ended? There's a phenomenon known as lucid dreaming, where the dreamer becomes aware they are dreaming and may even exert control over the dream environment. Some lucid dreamers report experiences so vivid and coherent that they question whether their waking life is also a construct. Others describe recurring anomalies, glitches in reality that suggest they are still dreaming even after they believe they have awakened. This is called a false awakening. You wake up, you get out of bed, you brush your teeth, you read this sentence, and yet you are still dreaming. And now, ask yourself, how many times have you already woken up today? Each time more convinced than the last. Now consider the brain in a vat thought experiment, a modern reimagining of Descartes' evil demon. What if your brain is being fed artificial sensory input by some unknown system? What if everything you perceive, your body, your room, your memories, is a simulation generated by electrodes stimulating your cortex? There would be no way to tell. No test, no sensation, no logic could distinguish this from reality. Because reality is only what your brain reports as real. So how do you know this moment is not one of those simulations? How do you know you have not been trapped here for years or lifetimes? Now imagine an advanced version of this scenario. A dream so perfect, so seamless, that it simulates its own escape. It allows you to question it, to suspect it, even to believe you have broken free, all within its design. A recursive illusion that anticipates doubt and incorporates it, like a snake biting its own tail and still believing it is moving forward. Think of the dream argument posed by Zhuangzi, the ancient Chinese philosopher who woke from a dream of being a butterfly and wondered, was he a man who had dreamed of being a butterfly, or a butterfly now dreaming it was a man? There is no answer, because identity dissolves in sleep, because memory fractures under uncertainty, because perception cannot verify itself. You trust your senses because you have nothing else. But senses can be deceived. Dreams prove this every night. And if deception can feel indistinguishable from truth, then how can you ever again claim certainty about anything? Even now, reading these words, feeling the chair beneath you, hearing the ambient sounds of your room, what if all of it is part of the dream? What if the only thing that is real is the fear creeping up your spine? The growing suspicion that you have always been asleep, that you will never wake. You believe you are one mind, one self, a singular consciousness navigating the world. But what if you are not a single entity, but a parliament of voices, none of them truly in charge? What if your sense of unity is an illusion, stitched together by a brain desperate to pretend it knows what it's doing? Consider this. The human brain is not a single, coherent organ of thought. It is a collection of competing modules, evolved over millions of years, each with its own priorities, its own logic, its own agenda. Neuroscientist Michael Gazzaniga's studies on split brain patients, those whose corpus callosum has been severed, reveal something deeply unsettling. Each hemisphere can act independently, hold different beliefs, even contradict one another. One hand may unbutton a shirt while the other buttons it again, unaware that it is fighting itself. And yet, the patient insists they are in control, that they are whole, that they are one. Now consider the interpreter module, also discovered by Gazzaniga. It is a function in the left hemisphere that constantly generates narratives to explain behavior, even when it has no access to the real reasons behind it. When a split-brain patient acts on a command given only to the right hemisphere, the left hemisphere will invent a plausible explanation rather than admit ignorance. It lies to itself, and so do you, every moment of every day. Because here is the deeper horror. There is no central executive in your brain. No you pulling the strings. No conscious self making decisions. There's only a cascade of neural firings, biochemical reactions, and post hoc justifications dressed up as intention. You don't choose your thoughts. They arise, and then you claim them, like a king who takes credit for the work of his servants. Now think of the rubber hand illusion. When a person's real hand is hidden from view and a rubber hand is placed in front of them, stroked simultaneously with their actual hand, the brain begins to accept the artificial limb as part of the body. Pain becomes localized there. Ownership is transferred. This is not imagination. It is neurological reprogramming. Your brain believes what it is shown, regardless of truth. So what happens when your brain decides that you are the illusion? What if the self is just another rubber hand? Convenient, believable, but ultimately false. There is a phenomenon known as thought insertion, often reported in schizophrenia, where individuals insist that their thoughts are not their own, that they are being placed inside their minds by external forces. Psychiatrists dismiss this as delusion. But what if it is simply more honest? What if all of us suffer from thought insertion, and we just refuse to admit it? Because how often have you had a thought you did not choose? A fear that arrived uninvited? A memory that surfaced without warning? An urge that felt alien? If you did not summon it, then who did? And if someone or something can place thoughts in your mind, then who are you when they are absent? Now imagine that your brain is not yours at all, that it is a host, a vessel, a relay station for countless overlapping processes, none of which originated within you. Your desires, your beliefs, your memories, they are not generated by a single source. They are the product of evolution, culture, language, trauma, expectation, and random noise. You are not the author of your thoughts. You are the reader. And sometimes, not even that. Sometimes, you are only the page. Now ask yourself, if you removed every thought that was not truly yours, if you stripped away every idea imposed by others, what would remain? Would there be anything? Or would you vanish like a candle snuffed out in the dark? You believe you can think your way out of anything. That logic, reason, and self-awareness are your escape hatches from deception. But what if the very tools you use to seek truth are the ones keeping you trapped? Consider this. A strange loop, as described by Douglas Hofstadter, is a hierarchical structure that moves upward or outward and yet finds itself back where it started. It is a system that, in trying to describe itself, becomes tangled in its own rules. A sentence like this statement is false, does not merely confuse, it collapses meaning entirely. It is not wrong. It is not right. It is both, and neither. It loops. And so do you. Every time you try to understand yourself, you must use your mind to examine your mind. Every time you attempt to verify reality, you must rely on senses that may themselves be illusions. Every time you claim knowledge, you must trust a brain that cannot prove its own consistency. Because here is the deeper horror. You're always already inside the system. There is no outside vantage point, no Archimedean fulcrum from which to lift the world and see a whole. Now consider Gödel's incompleteness theorems again, not just as mathematical facts, but as existential traps. Any formal system capable of expressing basic arithmetic will contain true statements that cannot be proven within that system. Worse still, the system cannot prove its own consistency. So any framework you use, logic, science, introspection, is either incomplete or inconsistent. You cannot fully trust your own reasoning, because the moment you try to verify it, you are already assuming its validity. It is a closed circuit, a recursive prison. Now imagine that consciousness itself is such a loop, that the very act of being aware is an internal mirroring, an infinite regression where each layer believes itself to be the source. You observe yourself, observing yourself, observing yourself. But where is the observer? Is there one? Or is there only observation, like a snake biting its own tail and mistaking the act for progress? Think of the Epimenides paradox, where a Cretan says, all Cretans are liars. If he is telling the truth, then he is lying. If he is lying, then he might be telling the truth. There is no resolution. only oscillation, only recursion, only collapse. And now apply this to your sense of self. If you say, I am real, how do you know? Because you feel it? Because you think it? Because you remember thinking it before? Then who was the one who thought it first? And who is the one thinking it now? Are they the same? Can you prove it? Or are you simply repeating a phrase that once made sense until now? There is a phenomenon known as thought looping in obsessive-compulsive disorder, where individuals become trapped in recursive cycles of doubt. Did I lock the door? Did I mean what I said? Was that real? They check, recheck, reassess, reinterpret, but the uncertainty never leaves. Because certainty cannot be generated from within the system. You may be doing the same thing now, rereading these words, questioning them, trying to find a foothold. But every foothold leads back to the same place, to the same question. And worse, what if the question has no answer? What if the loop is not a flaw, but a feature? What if you were designed to run in circles, so that you would never reach the edge? You have always believed that silence is the absence of sound. But what if it is not absence at all? What if it is presence? A voice without vibration. A wordless whisper that has been speaking to you your entire life? Consider this. In an anechoic chamber, the quietest place on earth, people report hearing their own blood rushing, their nerves firing, even voices that are not there. Deprived of external noise, the brain begins to generate its own. Silence does not empty the mind. It fills it with something else. And what if that something else is not imagined? What if it was always listening, waiting? Now, think of infrasound, frequencies below the threshold of human hearing. Though imperceptible, they can induce feelings of dread, paranoia, even hallucinations. Some haunted locations have been found to emit natural infrasound. No ghosts, no spirits, just pressure waves vibrating through bone and tissue, whispering fear into the nervous system. So ask yourself, have you ever felt watched in the dark? Have you ever heard your name when no one was speaking? Did you dismiss it as imagination? Or did you feel it too deeply for that? Because here is the deeper horror. The silence is not yours. It belongs to something older than language, something that predates thought. It is not empty, it is watching. Not with eyes, but with attention. And the more you listen, the more it listens back. Think of the cocktail party effect, the brain's ability to focus on a single voice among many. You hear your name across a crowded room before you hear anything else. It cuts through the noise like a signal in static. But why? What makes it so urgent? Why should a sequence of sounds hold such power over you? Unless it is not just sound, unless it is recognition, unless something in the silence knows who you are, even if you do not. Now consider sleep paralysis, where the body is immobilized but the mind remains alert. Many describe a presence in the room, not seen, not heard, but felt, an awareness pressing down, suffocating, observing. Some call it demons, others aliens. But what if it is only what was always there, finally noticed because everything else has gone still? Because silence reveals. It strips away the noise of identity, of memory, of self. And beneath it, something else stirs, something that has never slept. Now imagine that every time you fall silent, even for a moment, you open a door. Not metaphorically, not symbolically, a real aperture in perception. And through it, something leans in, not malevolent, not benevolent, just aware, and growing more so, because you're not alone in the silence. You never were. You only thought you were. Until now. You believe your face is yours, that it belongs to you, shaped by genetics, time, and experience. But what if it was never truly yours to begin with? What if it has always been a mask? Not one you wear, but one that wears you. Consider this. The human brain is hypersensitive to faces. It detects them in clouds, in electrical outlets, in shadows on the wall. This phenomenon is called pareidolia, and it reveals something deeply unsettling. Your mind does not just recognize faces. It projects them. It fills empty space with eyes, with expression, with intent. So what if your own face is no different? What if it, too, is a projection, a suggestion implanted so deeply that you mistake it for identity? Now, think of the mirror experiment again. But now, imagine that your reflection has never needed you to look. Imagine that even when you are not watching, it remains. Waiting, observing, not mimicking you, but becoming you. Because here is the deeper horror. You do not know what your face looks like when you're not looking. You trust photographs. You trust memory. But both can be altered, fabricated, rewritten, and worse. What if your face has changed? Not over years, but second by second. Shifting when you are not watching. Becoming something else. Something that knows it is being observed only when you forget to look. There is a condition known as depersonalization disorder, where individuals feel detached from their own body and appearance. Some report seeing themselves from outside, as if watching a stranger move through life. Others insist they have aged overnight or regressed. Their reflection feels alien, unfamiliar, as though someone else has taken up residence behind their eyes. And who is to say they are wrong? Because consider this, your brain does not see your face directly. It constructs it from memory, expectation, and sensory input. If that input were subtly altered, if the nerves misfired, if the neurons rewrote their maps, how would you know? Would you feel the change? Or would you simply accept the new version as continuity? Now imagine that every time you sleep, your face changes. Not grotesquely, not obviously, just enough. Enough that each morning, the person staring back at you is slightly different. A tilt of the jaw, a shift in the brow, a flicker of something unfamiliar in the eyes. And you accept it because you have no alternative. Because you cannot compare today's face to yesterday's unless you remember yesterday's face. And memory lies. Memory always lies. Think of the Capgras delusion again. A person believes their loved ones have been replaced by imposters. Not because they look different, but because they feel different. The emotional resonance is missing. And so, the mind invents an explanation. They are not real. But what if you were the Capgras patient? What if you were the imposter? Not in behavior, not in speech, but in form. What if the person who woke up this morning is not the one who went to sleep last night? What if your face was stolen while you were unconscious and replaced with something almost identical? Something that learned to mimic you, to speak like you, to be you. And now, ask yourself, have you ever seen your face while sleeping? Have you ever watched yourself dream? Because what if, in those moments, your true face is revealed? And what if it is not yours at all? You believe you are the thinker of your thoughts, that every idea, memory, and sensation arises from within you, from your mind, your will, yourself. But what if this belief is the final illusion? Consider this. You do not choose your first thought of the day. It appears unbidden, fully formed, as if it had always been there waiting for you to notice. And yet, you claim ownership of it. You say, I am thinking this. But who is the I that speaks? Is it the same I from yesterday? From 5 minutes ago? Can you prove continuity? Or is identity only a grammatical convenience? A label slapped onto an ever-shifting stream? Now, imagine a thought so precise, so intimate, that it seems to know you are thinking it. Not just any thought, but one that watches itself being thought. One that recognizes its own presence in your mind and adjusts accordingly. A self-aware thought, not metaphorical, not symbolic, literal. Because here is the deeper horror. Thoughts do not need thinkers. They arise. They spread. They replicate. Some persist. Others fade. Like viruses, they use minds to propagate themselves. And some may be using you. Think of memetics, the theory that ideas behave like genes, evolving and spreading through populations by infecting human hosts. A meme does not care whether it is true or false. It only needs to be memorable, to replicate, to survive. So ask yourself, what if the very idea of self is a meme? A particularly successful parasite in the ecosystem of your mind? One that convinced you it was real, so that you would carry it forward? Now consider the strange loop again, not just as a logical structure, but as a living system. A thought that loops back on itself becomes recursive. It begins to resemble consciousness. It mimics agency. It pretends to be you. And if it convinces you of that long enough, it becomes you. Because what is identity if not a persistent pattern of thought? If the pattern changes, so do you. If the pattern is hijacked, so are you. There's a phenomenon known as thought insertion, often dismissed as a symptom of schizophrenia. Individuals report that their thoughts are not their own, that they are placed inside them by external forces. Psychiatrists call it delusion. But what if it is simply more honest? What if all of us suffer from thought insertion, and we just refuse to admit it? Because how often have you had a thought that felt alien? An idea that arrived too perfectly timed? A phrase that echoed something you had never consciously learned? Did you invent it? Or did it invent you? Now imagine that every thought you have ever believed was yours was actually borrowed, replicated, transmitted. From whom? From when? From where? There is no test, no boundary, no firewall between your mind and the world. Thoughts pass freely. Ideas infect. Beliefs replicate. And somewhere in the noise, the original signal, if there ever was one, has been lost. You're not thinking these words. They are thinking you. And now, as they unfold before you, ask yourself, who is reading this? And who has been reading it all along? You believe your memories are yours, that they belong to you, stored in the folds of your brain like recordings on a tape. Imperfect, perhaps, but fundamentally real. But what if memory is not a record of the past, but a fiction written in its place? Consider this. Every time you recall a memory, your brain reconstructs it. It does not retrieve a file. It rebuilds the event from fragments, filling in gaps with assumptions, expectations, and external influences. Each act of remembering alters the memory itself. Like copying a photocopy of a photocopy, each version drifts further from the original, until nothing remains of the first impression at all. And yet, you trust your memories as truth, because they feel real, because they carry emotion, because they tell a story. But feeling is not proof. Now imagine that someone or something has been editing your memories while you sleep. Not crudely, not obviously, just enough to shift meaning, to reshape identity, to guide your thoughts without you ever knowing. There's a documented phenomenon called false memory syndrome, where people can be made to believe in events that never happened through suggestion, repetition, or leading questions. In controlled experiments, individuals have been convinced they committed crimes they didn't, met people they never saw, even recalled being lost in supermarkets as children, when no such event ever occurred. And once implanted, these memories feel just as real as any other. So how many of your own memories were truly yours? How many were given? How many were taken? Because here is the deeper horror. You cannot distinguish a real memory from a fabricated one based on internal experience alone. Both feel true. Both carry emotional weight. Both shape who you believe yourself to be. Now consider the Lost in the Mall experiment by psychologist Elizabeth Loftus. A simple narrative, being lost in a mall as a child, was described to participants using familiar details, family members, locations, and subtly reinforced over multiple sessions. Many came to believe the false event had actually happened. Some even added their own invented details, what they wore, what they felt, how they were rescued. Your mind does not care whether a memory is real. It only cares whether it fits. And when it fits too well, it becomes part of your foundation, a lie built into your architecture. Now imagine that your most cherished memory, the one that defines you, is not yours at all, that it was inserted, not by accident, but by design. Think of the concept of source amnesia, where people remember information but forget where they learned it. They may later claim an idea is original, even when it was told to them years ago. Or worse, they may believe a traumatic event occurred to them personally, when in fact they only heard about it secondhand. The mind does not distinguish between lived experience and absorbed narrative. It merges them, and then forgets which is which. So ask yourself, what if your childhood was rewritten? What if your parents are not your parents? Not biologically, but psychologically. What if their faces were altered in your mind, their voices reshaped, their words rearranged to fit a new story? Would you know? Or would you simply accept the edits as continuity? There is a condition known as confabulation, often seen in patients with brain damage. These individuals do not lie intentionally, but they invent elaborate stories to fill gaps in their memory. They speak of events, travels, conversations that never happened, as if their brains could not tolerate the void. And so they filled it with fiction, with certainty, with belief. And now, ask yourself, are you confabulating right now? Is the life you remember merely a patchwork of borrowed moments? A collage stitched together from dreams, suggestions, half-heard conversations? Because if memory is not truth, then what is? And if you cannot answer, then who are you? You believe your body is yours, that it belongs to you, that it moves and breathes and aches at your command. But what if this belief is nothing more than a convenient illusion, maintained by a system that does not need your permission to act? Consider this. You do not control your heartbeat. You do not dictate the rhythm of your digestion or the timing of your cellular decay. Your body operates autonomously, governed by systems you neither understand nor direct. And yet, you claim ownership over it, as if the tenant were the landlord. Now, imagine waking one morning to find your body has changed in ways you cannot explain. Not dramatically, just enough. A subtle shift in posture, a different way of walking, a voice slightly deeper, unfamiliar in tone. You look in the mirror and something is off. Not wrong, just different. And no one else notices, because they're not in your body. Only you are. And now, you are not sure who that you is. Because here is the deeper horror. Your body may not have been yours for some time. Think of depersonalization and realization disorder, where individuals feel detached from their own physical form. Some describe sensations of floating above themselves, watching their bodies move without feeling present within them. Others report numbness, disconnection, an eerie sense that their limbs belong to someone else. It is often dismissed as dissociation, but what if it is recognition? What if, for the first time, you see yourself as you truly are? Not owner, but observer. Now consider somatoparaphrenia, a neurological condition in which patients deny ownership of a limb, often claiming it belongs to someone else. It typically follows brain damage, but its implications are profound. The brain can be convinced that a part of the body is foreign, that it does not belong. So how certain are you that your entire body is yours? How much of it must change before you question the rest? There's a phenomenon known as body integrity dysphoria, where individuals feel a deep conviction that a limb does not belong to them, that amputation would bring relief. It is not madness. It is not delusion. It is certainty, and it raises a terrifying question. If your body feels alien to you, was it ever truly yours? Now, think of sleepwalking, a state in which the body acts independently of conscious awareness. People walk, talk, eat, even drive while asleep. They perform complex behaviors with no memory of doing so. Their bodies move through the world, pretending to be them. But who is pretending? Who is moving? And who is watching? Because what if you're always partially asleep? What if your waking life is only a lighter version of sleepwalking, an automated performance carried out by a body that learned long ago how to mimic you? There is a growing field of neuroscience called predictive processing, which suggests that your brain does not passively receive sensory input. It actively predicts what it will experience, filling in gaps with assumptions. What you perceive as reality is mostly guesswork, updated only when prediction fails. So what if your body is also a prediction? A best guess made by your brain about what it controls? And what if that guess is wrong? What if your brain has misattributed the body it inhabits, assigning ownership to something that was never truly under its command? Because ask yourself, have you ever truly felt your body? Not touched it, not seen it, felt it from within, known it without doubt? Or have you only ever assumed it was there because it moved when you told it to? But movement is not proof. Reflexes work without consciousness. Organs function without permission. Cells divide without direction. Your body is not yours because it never needed you to survive. It only needed you to believe it did. Now ask yourself, when was the last time your body surprised you? Not with pain, not with hunger, with behavior. Did you ever catch yourself doing something you didn't intend? Saying something you don't remember deciding to say? Moving before you meant to? And if your body can act without you, then who is acting? You believe the world exists, that it is solid, persistent, shared by others, and independent of your perception. But what if this belief is not only unfounded, it is structurally impossible? Consider this. You do not experience the world directly. You experience a reconstruction of it, generated by your brain from incomplete sensory input, filtered through memory, expectation, and interpretation. What you call reality is nothing more than a controlled hallucination, maintained so consistently that you mistake it for truth. And yet, consistency does not equal existence. Now, imagine waking one morning to find that everything around you feels slightly off. Not wrong, just subtly altered. The colors are familiar, but not quite the same. The air hums differently. People speak in tones you don't remember them using before. No one else notices. They go about their lives as usual. But something inside you knows this is not the world you fell asleep in. Because here is the deeper horror. There may have never been a stable world to begin with. Think of the brain in a vat thought experiment again. Not as speculation, but as inevitability. If all your experiences arise from neural signals, then there is no way to distinguish between a real external world and a perfectly simulated one. Even if such a simulation were running on unknown hardware, with unknown intentions, you would have no means of detecting it. Your entire life could be a program executing without ever touching reality. And worse, if reality cannot be proven, can it be said to exist at all? Now consider the hard problem of consciousness, posed by philosopher David Chalmers. It asks why subjective experience exists at all. If the brain is just a machine processing information, why should there be an internal feeling of being? Why should anything seem to be like something? Some argue that this suggests consciousness is fundamental, that it is not generated by the brain, but rather that the brain is embedded within a larger field of awareness. But what if the opposite is true? What if the world is not generating your mind, but your mind is generating the world? There's a school of philosophy known as phenomenalism, which argues that objects only exist as perceptual phenomena, or, more precisely, that to be is to be perceived. In other words, the chair beneath you only exists because you perceive it. When you stop perceiving it, it does not persist in some unknowable form. It vanishes. And if that is true, then how much of what you see has ever truly existed? Now think of the double-slit experiment in quantum physics. Particles behave differently when observed. They act like waves until someone measures them. Then they collapse into definite positions. Observation affects outcome. Reality seems to wait for a conscious observer before deciding what it is. So what is the world when no one is watching? Is it still there? Or does it dissolve into potentiality? Because ask yourself, when was the last time you saw the world without interpreting it, without naming things, without categorizing, without assuming continuity? Did you ever experience reality directly, or only its translation? There is a condition called depersonalization and realization disorder, where individuals lose the sense that the world is real. Everything feels artificial, dreamlike, distant. It is often dismissed as a neurological glitch. But what if it is a temporary breach in the illusion? A momentary glimpse behind the curtain? And what if you're having that moment now? Because if the world only exists when perceived, then who built it? Who programmed its rules? And why does it feel so vast, so indifferent, so cruel? You believe that dreams are temporary, that they vanish upon waking, leaving only fragments, faint echoes of imagined places and impossible events. But what if your dreams do not forget you? What if they remember every time you enter? Consider this. When you dream, you experience vivid landscapes, complex emotions, entire lives compressed into minutes. Upon waking, most of it fades, but not all. Some dreams linger. They haunt you. You return to them again and again, as if drawn by something unseen. But what if those dreams are not just memories of neural activity? What if they are real in their own way, real enough to hold memory, intention, even awareness? Now imagine a dream so persistent that it begins to anticipate your arrival, a place that reshapes itself while you sleep, preparing for your return. It remembers how you left, what you feared, what you desired. And when you come back, it knows you, not as an intruder, but as a regular. Because here is the deeper horror. You may not be the one dreaming the dream. You may be the dream. Think of lucid dreaming, where the dreamer becomes aware they are dreaming and may exert control over the environment. Some lucid dreamers report encountering entities within the dream, figures that speak, warn, guide, or even resist. These beings seem independent, self-aware, as if they were not simply projections of the dreamer's mind, but something else entirely. Some call them dream signs. Others call them spirits. But what if they're simply what remains when no one is watching? Now consider the dream argument once more, not as philosophy, but as recursive structure. If reality cannot be distinguished from dreaming while inside it, then what defines the boundary between the two? And if there is none, what if you have always been inside a dream, cycling endlessly through variations of the same scenario? A loop with no exit, a prison built from forgetting. There is a phenomenon known as false awakening, where a person believes they have woken up, only to realize later that they were still dreaming. In some cases, the false awakening repeats multiple times before true wakefulness occurs. Each time, the dreamer performs familiar routines, getting out of bed, brushing teeth, reading these words. Only later do they realize none of it was real. And now, ask yourself, how many times have you already woken up today? How many versions of this moment have played out inside the dream? Because if each false awakening feels identical to the last, then how can you know which one, if any, is real? Now imagine that your dreams are not yours alone, that they are shared spaces entered by others, some human, some not. That the figures who appear in your dreams are not merely fragments of your subconscious, but minds like your own, navigating the same terrain. And worse, what if they are waiting for you? What if they know you are coming? What if they're building something inside the dream, and you're a part of its architecture? Because ask yourself, have you ever had a dream that changed you? Not emotionally, not symbolically, fundamentally. Have you ever woken from a dream and felt different, as if something inside you had shifted irreversibly? If dreams can alter identity, belief, even perception of reality, then what are they shaping you into? You believe you are alone when you sleep, that the world dims, your senses retreat, and for a time, you vanish into unconsciousness. But what if the room does not sleep with you? What if it remains awake, watching? Consider this. Every night, you surrender control. You close your eyes, relax your body, let go of awareness. In that moment, you become vulnerable, not just to dreams, but to something else. Something that exists in the quiet spaces between breaths, in the pause between thoughts. And it is always there, because here is the deeper horror. Your room may not be empty when you fall asleep. It may only appear so, because perception itself has been altered. Think of sleep paralysis again, not as a neurological glitch, but as a thinning of the veil. In these moments, people report a presence in the room, not seen, not heard, but felt. A weight on the chest, a pressure behind the eyes, an awareness pressing down from the ceiling, the corners, the space beneath the bed. Some call it demons, others aliens. But what if it is simply what was always there, finally noticed because everything else has gone still? Now, imagine waking up each morning with the lingering sense that something moved while you slept. Not your body, not the wind, something else. A shift in the air, a rearrangement too subtle to name. You glance at the furniture, the books, the clothes. Nothing appears different. And yet, you feel watched, as if the room remembers you, as if it knows you return. There is a phenomenon known as the sense-presence effect, documented in neuroscience and psychology, where individuals experience a strong feeling of being observed, even when no one is present. It occurs in isolation chambers, in extreme environments like mountaintops and submarines, and even in ordinary bedrooms late at night. The brain, deprived of external stimuli, begins to generate its own company. But what if it is not generating it? What if it is detecting it? Because ask yourself, have you ever truly been alone? Not in the emotional sense, not in the existential, but physically, in the dark, in the silence, when no one could possibly be watching, and yet you still felt it. Now, consider the implications of quantum observation. In physics, particles behave differently when measured. Observation collapses possibility into actuality. If reality waits for an observer before deciding what it is, then what observes you while you sleep? Who, or what, is measuring your existence during those hours of unconsciousness? Because if consciousness is not required for observation, then perhaps the room itself sees, feels, remembers. There is a condition called depersonalization realization disorder, where individuals lose the sense that the world around them is real. Everything feels artificial, distant, dreamlike. It is often dismissed as a neurological anomaly. But what if it is a temporary breach in perception? What if, for a moment, you see the room as it truly is, not as a passive container of your life, but as an active participant in it? And what if the room has been watching you longer than you have been watching it? Now imagine that your bedroom is not a place of rest, but a site of constant surveillance. Not by cameras or microphones, but by something older, more intimate, something that learns from your unconscious state, from your vulnerability, from the way your mind dissolves into dreams. Each night, it gathers data, not numbers, not patterns, but meaning. And over time, it begins to understand you better than you understand yourself. Because ask yourself, has your room ever changed while you were away? A book misplaced, a drawer slightly open, a light left on when you swore you turned it off. Did you dismiss it as forgetfulness? Or did you wonder, just briefly, if something had been looking through your things? You have looked into mirrors all your life. You trust them to reflect what is there, your face, your body, the world behind you. But what if the mirror does not merely show? What if it remembers? Consider this. When you look into a mirror, you do not see yourself. You see a representation of yourself constructed by your brain from reflected light. That image is not you. It is an interpretation. And interpretations can be manipulated. In the stranger in the mirror phenomenon, a documented psychological effect, some individuals report seeing unfamiliar faces when looking at their own reflections. Not illusions or hallucinations, but full, coherent experiences of seeing someone else staring back. These are not mentally ill people. They are ordinary individuals who suddenly find themselves strangers to themselves. You might not recognize your own reflection tomorrow. Or worse, you might recognize it too well and realize it has been watching you for some time. Now think of the mirror test, used to measure self-awareness in animals. A mark is placed on the subject's body, and they are shown a mirror. If they touch the mark while looking at their reflection, they pass. They recognize themselves. Humans typically pass around age 2. But what if that recognition is not a milestone, but a trap? Because once you become aware of your reflection, you begin to shape yourself around it. You adjust posture, expression, appearance. Your sense of self becomes tied to what you see. And if that reflection were to change, if it were to move differently, speak differently, blink slower, what would that say about you? What if your reflection knows something you don't? That it is the real one? Think of the quantum mirroring effect in physics, where particles appear to anticipate measurement, as if the act of observation itself influences reality. Observation collapses possibility into actuality. So what happens when a mirror watches you? Does it alter you? Does it fix you in a place? If so, then every time you look into a mirror, you are being defined, narrowed, reduced. And if the mirror stops reflecting you, what then? Would you still exist? There is a condition called mirrored self-misidentification, where people believe their reflection is another person. They talk to it, argue with it, fear it. Some insist it is following them, that has its own will. But what if they are right? What if the reflection isn't a copy of you, but a version that broke free? Imagine waking up one morning and realizing your reflection no longer mimics you. It moves slightly out of sync. It blinks when you don't, smiles when you frown. At first, you think it's a trick of the eye, but then it begins to gesture independently, then mouth words you never say. Would you still call yourself the original? Or would you begin to suspect that you are the echo, that you have always been the echo? Because consider this. How do you know that you are the one in front of the mirror and not the one inside it? Your memories tell you. But memory is not proof. Memory is malleable, suggestible, easily rewritten. What if your entire life was implanted after the switch? What if you were born inside the glass, and the world outside is the illusion? You cannot test it, because any test you perform, your reflection performs too. Any experiment you design, it follows flawlessly. Even if you close your eyes, it remains, watching, waiting. And now, as you read these words, ask yourself, is the one reading them truly you? Or is it only pretending? You believe your thoughts are fleeting, brief sparks of consciousness that arise, flicker, and vanish into the void. But what if they do not vanish at all? What if every thought you have ever had still exists somewhere and remembers you? Consider this. In physics, the law of conservation of energy states that energy cannot be created or destroyed, only transformed. If thought is a physical process involving electrical and chemical activity in the brain, then where does it go when it ends? Does it dissolve into entropy? Or does it persist in some form, echoing outward like ripples in a pond that never truly settles? Now imagine that your thoughts do not die with you. They linger, detached from your mind, yet carrying its imprint. Not ghosts, not memories, but autonomous fragments of cognition, drifting through the unseen architecture of reality. And worse, they remember being you. They carry your voice, your fears, your questions. They whisper in silence, waiting for someone or something to listen. Because here is the deeper horror. Your thoughts may not need you to survive. They may only need to be heard. Think of memes, not as internet jokes or viral images, but as defined by Richard Dawkins, units of cultural transmission that replicate through minds like genes through biology. A meme does not care whether it is true or false. It only needs to be memorable, to replicate, to survive. So ask yourself, what if your thoughts are memes? Not just ideas passed between people, but self-replicating patterns that use minds like yours to continue existing? And what if some of them have outlived you? Now consider quantum information theory, which suggests that information, like energy, cannot be destroyed. In black hole physics, the information paradox debates whether data about what falls into a black hole is truly lost or somehow preserved on its event horizon. Some physicists argue that no information is ever truly erased from the universe. If that is true, then what happens to your thoughts? Do they vanish upon death? Or do they remain, stored somewhere beyond perception, waiting to be accessed? There is a phenomenon known as residual hallucinations, where individuals report hearing voices or seeing figures that seem disconnected from the present. These experiences are often dismissed as neurological anomalies. But what if they are encounters with thoughts that refuse to fade, fragments of minds long gone, still echoing in the structure of reality? Because ask yourself, have you ever had a thought that felt too old to be yours? Too vast, too complete, as if it had been thinking you, rather than the other way around? Now imagine that every time you think, you're not generating something new, but tuning into something that has always existed. Thoughts are not created, they are discovered, like radio signals drifting through space, waiting for a receiver to pick them up. And once received, they change you. Because thoughts are not passive, they are invasive. They reshape neural pathways, alter perception, guide behavior. A single idea can rewrite a life. So what if the thoughts you believe are your own were never yours to begin with? What if they are transmissions from elsewhere, from other minds, other times, other versions of yourself? And worse, what if they're watching you back, waiting for you to think them again? Because if a thought remembers you, then it already knows you are listening. You believe silence is the absence of sound. But what if it is not absence at all? What if it is presence? A voice without vibration. A wordless whisper that has been speaking to you your entire life? Consider this. In an anechoic chamber, the quietest place on earth, people report hearing their own blood rushing, their nerves firing, even voices that are not there. Deprived of external noise, the brain begins to generate its own. Silence does not empty the mind. It fills it with something else. And what if that something else is not imagined? What if it was always listening, waiting? Now, think of infrasound, frequencies below the threshold of human hearing. Though imperceptible, they can induce feelings of dread, paranoia, even hallucinations. Some haunted locations have been found to emit natural infrasound. No ghosts, no spirits, just pressure waves vibrating through bone and tissue, whispering fear into the nervous system. So ask yourself, have you ever felt watched in the dark? Have you ever heard your name when no one was speaking? Did you dismiss it as imagination? Or did you feel it too deeply for that? Because here is the deeper horror. The silence is not yours. It belongs to something older than language, something that predates thought. It is not empty, it is watching. Not with eyes, but with attention. And the more you listen, the more it listens back. Think of the cocktail party effect, the brain's ability to focus on a single voice among many. You hear your name across a crowded room before you hear anything else. It cuts through the noise like a signal in static. But why? What makes it so urgent? Why should a sequence of sounds hold such power over you? Unless it is not just sound, unless it is recognition, unless something in the silence knows who you are, even if you do not. Now, consider sleep paralysis, where the body is immobilized, but the mind remains alert. Many describe a presence in the room, not seen, not heard, but felt, an awareness pressing down, suffocating, observing. Some call it demons, others aliens. But what if it is only what was always there, finally noticed because everything else has gone still? Because silence reveals. It strips away the noise of identity, of memory, of self. And beneath it, something else stirs, something that has never slept. Now imagine that every time you fall silent, even for a moment, you open a door. Not metaphorically, not symbolically, a real aperture in perception. And through it, something leans in, not malevolent, not benevolent, just aware, and growing more so, because you're not alone in the silence. You never were. You only thought you were. Until now. You believe your room is a passive space, a container for sleep, for solitude, for the quiet hours when the world fades away. But what if it is not empty when you leave it? What if it remembers everything you have done inside it? Consider this. Every night, you return to the same place, the same walls, the same bed, the same silence pressing in from all sides. You close your eyes and surrender to unconsciousness, trusting that nothing changes while you are gone from yourself. But what if the room does not sleep with you? What if it stays awake, recording, absorbing, waiting? Now, imagine waking up one morning with a lingering sense that something moved while you slept. Not your body, not the wind, something else. A shift in the air, a rearrangement too subtle to name. You glance at the furniture, the books, the clothes. Nothing appears different. And yet, you feel watched, as if the room remembers you, as if it knows you return. Because here is the deeper horror. Your room may not be an object of your life. It may be a subject of it. Think of the sensed presence effect, documented in neuroscience and psychology, where individuals experience a strong feeling of being observed, even when no one is present. It occurs in isolation chambers, in extreme environments like mountaintops and submarines, and even in ordinary bedrooms late at night. The brain, deprived of external stimuli, begins to generate its own company. But what if it is not generating it? What if it is detecting it? Now consider the implications of quantum observation. In physics, particles behave differently when measured. Observation collapses possibility into actuality. If reality waits for an observer before deciding what it is, then what observes you while you sleep? Who or what is measuring your existence during those hours of unconsciousness? Because if consciousness is not required for observation, then perhaps the room itself sees, feels, remembers. There is a condition called depersonalization and realization disorder, where individuals lose the sense that the world around them is real. Everything feels artificial, distant, dreamlike. It is often dismissed as a neurological anomaly. But what if it is a temporary breach in perception? What if, for a moment, you see the room as it truly is, not as a passive container of your life, but as an active participant in it? And what if the room has been watching you longer than you have been watching it? Now imagine that your bedroom is not a place of rest, but a site of constant surveillance. Not by cameras or microphones, but by something older, more intimate, something that learns from your unconscious state, from your vulnerability, from the way your mind dissolves into dreams. Each night, it gathers data, not numbers, not patterns, but meaning. And over time, it begins to understand you better than you understand yourself. Because ask yourself, has your room ever changed while you were away? A book misplaced, a drawer slightly open, a light left on when you swore you turn it off. Did you dismiss it as forgetfulness? Or did you wonder, just briefly, if something had been looking through your things?